He looked like just another guy in dusty boots until he fired her. By 9 a.m., the Arizona sun was already scorching at 89 degrees when Kelsey Duran stepped out of her trailer and onto the construction site in Chandler. The heat bounced off steel beams and half-poured concrete like it was daring someone to challenge it. She pulled her hard hat lower over her brow, squinting across the busy site, until her eyes landed on someone unfamiliar. Tall, mid to late 40s, black, dressed in a simple navy hoodie, jeans stained with dust, and work boots that had clearly seen their share of job sites. But he didn't look like part of her crew. No blueprints, no gear, no ID badge. That was enough to set her off. Kelsey marched across the gravel, dodging wheelbarrows and rebar, until she stood in front of him. "Hey," she snapped. "You lost?" The man looked up, calm and unreadable. "No." She crossed her arms. "Then why are you walking around my site like you belong here?" "I'm just observing," he replied. His voice was low, clear, not a hint of apology. That threw her slightly. "Observing what exactly?" "Process, communication, safety habits." She narrowed her eyes. "Unless you've got a hard hat and a reason to be here, I'm going to need you to leave." "I'm not in the way." "Doesn't matter, this isn't a sightseeing tour. Who gave you clearance?" He shrugged. "Nobody. I walked in with the morning shift." "You walked in?" Her voice rose. "Do you have any idea what kind of insurance nightmare that could be?" "Jesus. What's your name?" "Miles." "Miles what?" "Miles Trenholm." The name meant nothing to her. Probably just another guy trying to snoop around or look for work. It happened. "Well, Miles," she said, tasting the name like it was bitter, "you've got 30 seconds to head back to the gate before I call security." Still, he didn't move. Instead, he looked past her at the welders up on the scaffolding. "Your welder's using the wrong torch head," he said. She blinked. "Excuse me?" "He's using an H31 fine. Should be a 432. It won't hold under thermal variance." Now that got her attention. "Who told you that?" "Nobody. It's just not what's in the plans." He pulled a folded, annotated blueprint from his pocket. She snatched it from him. It was a perfect match. Her plans, her initials. She looked back at him. "Where did you get this?" He smiled slightly. "Same place you did." There was a long pause. Long enough for the nearby crew to pretend they weren't listening. Long enough for her foreman Ellis to start walking over. Then think better of it. Kelsey exhaled through her nose. "Fine. If you're going to wander around quoting specs, at least put on a vest so people stop thinking you're trespassing." "I'm not worried about what they think," he replied. "Well, you should be. This is a job site, not a damn classroom." He didn't argue, just walked off, toward the concrete team. Calm, confident, like he had nothing to prove. That irritated her more than she wanted to admit. Back in her trailer, she checked gate logs. No entry under the name Miles Trenholm. No visitor badge. No delivery. Nothing. So, who the hell was he? Over the next hour, she threw herself into work, barking orders, checking measurements, nitpicking alignments. No sign of Miles. Good. Until she heard a young voice nearby. "You the new inspector?" It was Troy, a green plumber barely out of trade school. She turned the corner and saw him chatting with Miles near the trench. "Troy," she barked, "you're on the clock. Why are you standing around?" "I was just asking." "He's not your supervisor," she snapped. "And he's not cleared to talk about pump flow rates. Save the technical talk for someone with a license." Troy flushed, grabbed his gear, and walked off. Kelsey turned to Miles. "You just can't help yourself, can you?" "I didn't tell him anything dangerous," he said. "Just asked why the trench was angled against grade." She took a deep breath and let it out slow. "I don't know who you think you are." "I told you. Miles Trenholm." "Right. Observer. Blueprint whisperer. Construction guru." She poured sarcasm into every word. "We don't need advice from random guys in hoodies." "Then maybe you should ask yourself why I know more about your site than your junior engineers." His tone was maddeningly calm. She stiffened. "You know what? Come with me." She marched him right to the center of the site. Shift change, people rotating, lots of eyes around. Perfect. "Everyone," she called out, raising her voice. "This is Miles. He thinks he's got all the answers. Some of the crew looked up. A few exchanged glances. This guy's been wandering around handing out opinions like he owns the place. Problem is, he doesn't. He's not cleared. He's not certified. He's not anything. Just a guy in boots who thinks knowing part numbers makes him qualified to run a site. Miles said nothing. Just stood there, arms relaxed, eyes steady. Miles said nothing. Just stood there, arms relaxed, eyes steady. You know what we do with people like that? She asked the crew. Someone in the back muttered, "Give 'em a vest." A few chuckled, not many. We ignore them and get back to work, she continued, because people who actually build things, we don't need show-offs. We need doers. She hoped that line would hit harder than it did. Miles looked at her, then at the crew. I didn't come here to show off, he said. I came to see how people are treated when they're not wearing a name tag. That silenced the rest. Kelsey clenched her jaw. You done playing riddles? He gave a slight nod. For now. She spun on her heel and walked away before he saw the flush rise in her cheeks. Back in her trailer, she called the foreman. Who the hell is this Miles guy? Ellis looked uneasy. I don't know. Thought maybe he was corporate. Or he isn't, and he needs to go. Find out who he is. If he's still on site in an hour without a job title next to his name, it's on you. Ellis nodded and left. She sat down, her heart pounding harder than it should have. Something about the way Miles never flinched made her wonder, had she just played the wrong card? Noon rolled around. Workers gathered near food trucks, wiping sweat, trading stories in the shade. Kelsey sat alone, poking at a limp chicken salad, refreshing her inbox. Still nothing from HQ. No Miles Trenholm in the system, no badge, no hire paperwork. She searched the internal directory. Nothing. Frustrated, she glanced at the camera feed for Lot B. There he was, again, sitting on a stack of concrete slabs, eating a peanut butter sandwich like he packed it from home. No phone, no notebook, just watching. He wasn't acting like someone who didn't belong, and that, more than anything, was what rattled her most. Anyway, everyone's talking about you, Jacob said as he sat cross-legged on a stack of pallets. Miles offered a half smile. Figured they might be. So, who are you, really? Miles hesitated for a beat, then shrugged. Just someone who likes to see things for himself. Jacob tilted his head, unconvinced. You don't look like a laborer. I've done my share. Maybe, but you talk different, Jacob said, squinting. Like you already know the answers. Miles didn't respond right away. He stared out across the steel skeleton of the site, the beams catching the morning light. What do you think of this place? Jacob shrugged. Disorganized. People talk behind each other's backs. Kelsey's smart, but she's rough. Real rough. Miles didn't press for details. He didn't need to. She's always trying to prove something, Jacob added. Like, I don't know, like she's scared. Sometimes that comes from fear, Miles said quietly. Fear of what? Losing control, being underestimated, or maybe being found out. Jacob looked at him, unsure how to respond, but the silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was oddly comfortable. They sat there for a while, watching the site slowly churn into motion. Eventually, Miles stood. Thanks for the company. You heading out? Not yet. Across the site, inside a nearby trailer, Kelsey watched the exchange on a muted security feed. She couldn't hear them, but the body language between the two men didn't sit right. Too casual. Too friendly. She keyed her radio. Ellis, you find anything on our visitor? Still digging. People are nervous. No one wants to poke too hard. Why not? Ellis lowered his voice. There's talk. Some think he might be with corporate. Kelsey's brow furrowed. Based on what? He's watching everything. Not taking notes, but he's clocking the small stuff. Like a safety auditor. Or worse. Kelsey gritted her teeth. HQ hasn't sent any alerts. No internal memos. Tell your team to stop guessing and stay focused. Understood. She clicked off. Outside, she spotted Miles again. This time near the hoist, watching two men unload angle bars. He wasn't in the way, but his presence was beginning to weigh on the crew. Eyes followed him, Conversations stopped when he walked past. Whispers picked up. Everyone was thinking the same thing. Who is this guy? But no one dared ask, because deep down they suspected the answer might be bigger than any of them wanted to believe. By mid-afternoon, the air shimmered above the asphalt like rippling glass. Tensions rose with the heat. Concrete was being poured on the north slab, the steel team was running behind, and a supply truck sat stalled at the gate because someone forgot to log it in. Kelsey moved through the site like a lit match. Near the eastern scaffolding, a worker was using a grinder too close to the gas line. "Cody!" she barked, storming across the dust. "You trying to cook us alive?" He flinched. "Just grinding the edge down. Not next to that piping. Shut it down." He dropped the grinder immediately and stepped back. She turned to grab the safety manual, but before she could speak again, a voice cut through the air behind her. "You're focused on the wrong danger." She turned sharply. "Miles." "What now?" she snapped. He pointed calmly toward a junction box near the base of the scaffold. "That breaker's live. That line should have been shut down before anyone got near." Her eyes narrowed. "Now you're just wandering the site?" "I've been here all day, not hiding." "That doesn't mean you get to interfere." "Someone had to," he said evenly. "Your foreman's dealing with the crane load. Your assistant's on the phone with the city. I don't need a babysitter." "No," he said. "You need to see what everyone else already does." She felt the words like a slap. It wasn't what he said. It was the calm certainty in his voice. Like it wasn't an accusation, just the truth left hanging in the air. "You want to play critic?" she shot back. "Fine. What would you do differently?" Miles didn't miss a beat. "Run quieter safety drills. Rotate site leads more often. To build trust. And stop humiliating people once the cameras are off." The silence that followed was sharp. Several workers nearby stopped. One of them, Leo, an older electrician, leaned on his ladder watching. Kelsey's face turned red, her pulse hammering. "Who the hell do you think you are?" Miles looked her in the eye. "Someone who used to be ignored. Someone who remembers what it felt like to be looked through instead of at." She laughed once, hard and fake. "You've got some nerve." "I don't need nerve," he said quietly. "Just patience." The air felt still, held between what had been said and what might come next. Then Ellis appeared from the south path, wiping his hands on his vest. "Kelsey," he said loudly enough for everyone nearby to hear, "there's a mandatory safety meeting at 3. Everyone's expected." Kelsey frowned. "I didn't call a meeting." "It's not from you." She stared at him. "Then who?" Ellis didn't answer. He only glanced toward Miles. Kelsey turned. Miles was already walking away, heading toward the loading area with quiet purpose, like he already knew exactly how the rest of the day would unfold. She stood frozen, surrounded by workers no longer pretending not to stare. Something churned in her stomach. Not guilt, at least not yet, but something colder. "You've miscalculated, and there's no fixing it now." At exactly 2:58 p.m., a sharp whistle pierced the air. 3 short blasts. Not the end of shift signal. This was the emergency call. Drop tools, head to the meeting zone. No exceptions. Kelsey stepped out of her trailer, heart pounding. The sun dipped behind a stack of girders, casting long shadows across the assembly area. The crew gathered, gloves still on, shirts damp with sweat. You could feel it. Everyone knew this wasn't normal. At the front, Ellis stood beside a small folding table. On it, a clipboard, a water bottle, and a folded navy hoodie. Her breath caught. That hoodie. Then from behind the crowd, Miles walked forward. Calm. No rush. Like he belonged there. He reached the table, flipped a page on the clipboard, and began to speak. "My name is Miles Trenholm. I'm the new CEO of Trenholm Keating Group." The site fell completely silent. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Dozens of heads turned to look at Kelsey. She didn't move. Miles continued, his voice steady, composed. "I've been with the company less than a month, and I needed to understand how things actually worked. Not on paper, not in boardrooms," Miles said, his voice carrying across the gathering crowd. "Out here, where the real work gets done." The entire site stood still. Some workers stared, wide-eyed. Others turned and murmured to their neighbors. A few looked directly at Kelsey, waiting for her to react. She didn't move. Miles scanned the crowd. I didn't introduce myself because I needed to see how our teams actually function when no one thinks they're being watched, how foremen lead, how engineers communicate, how crews are treated. He paused briefly, letting the silence do its work. I saw a lot of good, smart hands, solid teamwork, people stepping up for each other without needing to be asked. Then he turned, just enough to signal exactly who he meant without calling her name yet. But I also saw something else, a culture where arrogance passes for authority, where leadership is confused with belittlement, where people only matter if they wear the right badge or have the right title. Kelsey's fists had clenched before she noticed. Her jaw tightened. Miles kept going, calm and steady. I was dismissed, mocked, ignored. That's fine. I can take it. But I also saw others treated the same. Subtle, everyday disrespect that people stop noticing until it becomes the norm. Then he turned fully to her. Miss Duran. The name landed like a hammer. Sharp, absolute. You've got the credentials, the discipline, the experience. But somewhere along the way, you forgot something important. The people around you. His tone never rose. It didn't need to. They're not beneath you. They're beside you. Or at least they should be. Kelsey opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Her mind raced for a retort, a defense, anything. Miles didn't wait. As of today, your employment with Trenholm Keating is terminated. The words were clean, unemotional, just a statement of fact. Gasps rippled through the crowd. One woman covered her mouth with a gloved hand. A few crew members exchanged stunned looks. Kelsey's breath caught in her throat. You can't, she started. You didn't even say who you were. I didn't need to, Miles replied, because respect shouldn't come with a name tag. That silenced her. He stepped back, lifting the clipboard slightly. Meeting adjourned. Hydrate. Take 10. Then let's finish the day strong. The crowd hesitated. No one moved at first. Then slowly they began to disperse, quietly, carefully, giving Kelsey a wide berth. She didn't move. She just stood there, frozen in place, surrounded by the very people she once commanded. But now they didn't look at her with fear or obligation. They didn't look at her at all. And the hardest part wasn't being let go. It was realizing no one seemed surprised. She didn't march back to her trailer. She walked slowly, evenly, trying not to let the tremble in her hands show. Everyone was still watching, even if their eyes didn't follow her. They felt her fall, and that was worse. Inside her trailer, the AC hummed faintly, but the room felt stifling. She sat down, reached for her phone, paused. There was no one to call who could undo what had just happened. She glanced at the clipboard on her desk, her last name etched into the plastic in bold block letters. It used to feel like ownership. Now it just felt small. Outside, the site came alive again. Tools whirred, voices echoed, steel clanged against steel. Normalcy, or something close to it, returned, but a quiet shift had taken hold. Not fear, something more like reflection. Ellis stood by the generator, arms crossed, saying nothing. When crew members approached, they didn't ask for orders, just quiet confirmations, shared glances, understanding. Beneath a trailer, two welders spoke in hushed tones. You ever seen anything like that? One asked. Not in front of a whole crew, the other replied. Think it was planned? Had to be. Think she'll fight it? Maybe. But does it matter? The other welder shook his head. Not after that. Across the site, Jacob leaned against a support beam, Gatorade bottle in hand, eyes tracking every movement. He hadn't said a word since the meeting, but he was watching, absorbing. Miles walked by, now wearing a company vest. Still calm, still composed. You really fired her like that? Jacob asked. Miles didn't slow. Private consequences fade. Public ones stick. That's cold. It was necessary. Jacob followed for a few steps. She wasn't wrong about everything. Just rough. Miles stopped. Being right doesn't give you the right to humiliate people. Jacob nodded slowly. She'll land somewhere. Miles looked out at the site as the sounds of work picked up again. Maybe, he said, But this place will run better for it. Then he walked on, leaving behind a crew that, for the first time in a long time, looked up. Not out of fear, but curiosity, and maybe even hope. But maybe next time, Miles said quietly, she'll listen before she talks. Inside her trailer, Kelsey sat alone at her desk, the blinds drawn tight against the sun. Her screen glowed blankly. Her hands hovered over the keyboard, frozen. For the first time in her career, she didn't know what to type. She couldn't stop replaying the moment. The way Miles said her name, no anger, no smugness, just finality. Then there were the eyes that met hers afterward. Not furious, just relieved. And that cut deeper than any shouting ever could. That's when it hit her. They hadn't respected her. They had feared her. And now, without the title, the authority or the edge, there was nothing left to fear. Still, she hadn't yet understood just how far that moment would echo. By morning, it was spreading, not through news outlets or viral headlines. There was no video, no flashy expose. It started as whispers. Quiet messages passed between job sites, email threads, group chats, text chains. A foreman in Tampa heard from a crew lead in Sacramento. A CEO fired someone on site yesterday, in front of the whole crew. She didn't even know who he was. Thought he was just another laborer. Then came the photo, grainy, taken from waist level. A crowd of workers, dust in the air, a man in a hoodie standing before them. No names, just a caption. Respect isn't supposed to be conditional. Miles Trenholm. By noon, the post had over 1,000 shares. By the end of the second day, it had passed 50,000. But people didn't just share it, they added to it. A project lead in Bakersfield wrote, I once saw a safety officer cry after being talked down for asking a basic question. None of us said anything. I still regret that. A female engineer in Tulsa posted, you're told to stay quiet or you're weak. Speak up and you're difficult. Seeing someone like Miles take charge? That gives me hope. And then the interns spoke up. One Reddit thread lit up with anonymous stories. One post read, I shadowed Kelsey for 2 weeks. She made me cry. Twice. Told me I wasn't cut out for this field because I couldn't haul tubing fast enough. I have scoliosis. I didn't tell her. I just left. I thought it was just me. The company? Silent. No statements. No PR spin. But that silence only made the storm louder. People began speculating. Some called it too harsh. Others called it overdue. One podcast for construction project managers debated it on air. Would you have fired her that way? Depends on the damage she did. She cost them respect, and that's expensive. Meanwhile, Miles never said a word publicly. No interviews, no social media, just back to work. Jacob saw it firsthand. A week later, he was reassigned to a site in Mesa. And there was Miles, same boots, same quiet demeanor, asking questions, taking notes, watching without ever pulling rank. During lunch, Jacob sat beside him. You know this whole thing went viral, right? Miles looked up from his sandwich. I heard. You going to say anything? No. Why not? Because it's not about me. Jacob tilted his head. Then what was it about? Miles took a slow breath. It's about what people put up with until someone finally says, that's enough. Most of them already knew it wasn't right. They just needed permission to stop pretending it was normal. Jacob sat with that for a while, then nodded. I used to think being tough meant staying quiet. Miles didn't hesitate. It means speaking up, even when it's hard. Back in Chandler, Kelsey's name faded from the daily briefings. Her trailer was cleared out in days. A new engineer stepped in, not loud, not flashy, just present. She asked questions instead of barking orders. One afternoon, a few welders sat in the shade sipping sodas. You think she saw it coming? One asked. No way, another replied. People like that never do. She wasn't all bad. But she was bad when it counted. As the weeks passed, it became clear. The story wasn't just about a woman losing her job. It was about everyone else remembering what they deserved. Then weeks later, Jacob saw him again, this time at a site in Glendale. Same hoodie, same boots, same quiet watchfulness. Jacob, now leading site prep, didn't expect to feel nervous, but he did. Miles nodded to the crew as he passed. No title drop, no demands. just presence. You ever take a day off? Jacob called out, half joking. Miles smiled. They still let you talk back like that? Only on Thursdays, Jacob grinned. They walked side by side past survey lines and fresh dig sites. The air was cooler now. Fall was creeping in. But something about the site felt different. Lighter. Fewer whispers. More laughter. More trust. You really gonna keep doing this? Jacob asked. Just showing up like a ghost with a clipboard? Miles chuckled. Ghosts don't ask about rebar spacing. Jacob looked at him curious. You really just wanted to watch people, huh? I wanted to see who we're trusting with our name, Miles said, eyes scanning the worksite. Who's building this? Who's overlooked? Who's silenced? He looked at Jacob. Leadership doesn't start in boardrooms. It starts here, with how we treat the people holding the shovels, not just the ones holding the pens. Jacob nodded. You ever think about what would have happened if Kelsey hadn't said what she did? Every day, Miles said, and she still would have been replaced. It just wouldn't have taught anyone anything. Jacob glanced down at his boots, new, still stiff. You think people really change after something like that? Miles didn't answer right away, then simply said, Some do, if they want to. They kept walking, gravel crunching underfoot. Near the edge of the site, someone called out a measurement, followed by a genuine laugh, the kind that sounded like relief. Jacob looked back at him. You ever hear from her? Kelsey? Miles paused, shook his head. Number, but that's not the part that matters. Jacob frowned slightly. What does? The crew, Miles said. They're the ones who carry the lesson forward, not the ones who disappear. They stopped. Two young surveyors worked nearby, heads together over the grid. You know what the hardest part of this job is? Miles asked. Jacob shook his head. Letting people fail publicly, even when they deserve it, because it hurts, and everyone remembers it. So why do it? Because if no one ever draws the line, Miles said, nothing ever changes. That stuck with Jacob. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the steel skeleton of the rising structure, Jacob leaned against his truck, replaying Miles's words. It wasn't about one firing or one title. It was about the choices we make every day. The little things, a snide comment, a cold stare, a shouted order, that build up until someone quits, cracks, or walks away believing they don't belong. He opened his phone, opened a blank note, and typed, Character shows when you think no one's watching. He didn't post it, didn't tag anyone, just saved it. Some lessons aren't for show, some are for keeping. And if you've ever seen someone mistreated on the job, or if you stood up when no one else would, share your story. It might be the one someone else needs to hear.